Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. The minutes ticked by painfully for Jason, each second stretching into an eternity. He and his wife, Beatrice, sat in the sterile confines of the doctor's office, anxiously awaiting the verdict on his medical tests. For months, Jason had battled an unrelenting wave of illness, and despite numerous visits to various doctors, no one had been able to unravel the mystery of his condition. While he was relieved to learn that it wasn't cancer or a heart ailment, the absence of answers left a nagging sense of uncertainty. Their journey led them to Dr. Batter, a renowned specialist known for tackling the most perplexing medical cases. Patients from every corner of the country flocked to him when traditional medicine failed to provide clarity. Jason and Beatrice felt fortunate to secure an appointment with such an esteemed physician. After days filled with exhaustive tests that examined every inch of his body, they were finally called in to hear the results. A wave of anticipation washed over them as Dr. Batter stepped into the room. He was an older gentleman with thin-rimmed glasses perched on his nose and a warm, reassuring smile that instantly put them at ease. "Hello, Jason and Beatrice. I apologize for the delay," he said, settling into his chair. "I have some good news, Jason. You should be fine." A collective sigh of relief escaped their lips, the weight of worry lifting slightly from their shoulders. They had dreaded the possibility of grim news after their agonizing wait. "What's going on with me, Doc?" Jason asked, his voice tinged with curiosity. "Why do I keep throwing up?" Dr. Batter leaned forward, his expression serious yet compassionate. "It's a rare but straightforward neurological disorder that interferes with your biological functions," he explained, unveiling the enigma that had haunted Jason for so long. As the pieces of his health puzzle began to fall into place, hope flickered in the air, brightening the room with the promise of understanding and recovery. "You can take care of Jason's health with a simple prescription that your health insurance will pay for. Although this means that you need to stick to such a regime for life, it opens the way to a long and fulfilling future." "How nice to hear that," Beatrice exclaimed with a smile. "I've been losing sleep over the Jason situation for months now." Dr. Batter nodded, his expression changing slightly. "This brings me to you, Beatrice. I need to discuss something with you in private, if you don't mind." Concern flickered between Jason and Beatrice, and they exchanged glances and then turned back to the doctor. "Is everything okay?" Beatrice asked, concern in her voice. Dr. Batter calmed her down. "I just want to share with you some simple measures that will help Jason feel better." Jason, sensing the seriousness of the conversation, said they didn't have to stay to discuss these details. "Why don't you go outside for a while?" "He's probably right, honey," Beatrice agreed softly. "Get some fresh air. I'll join you at the cafe next door in a while." Relieved to be out of the clinical setting, Jason nodded and went outside. He was tired of the constant visits to doctors and was ready to leave the sterile walls. After finally hearing positive news about his health, he was ready to put the medical drama in the past. He shook hands with Dr. Batter, expressed his gratitude, and left the office, unaware of the upcoming weighty conversation. "Beatrice," Dr. Batter began in a serious tone, "your husband is suffering from a serious illness. The real state of his health is much more serious than I initially assumed." Beatrice's heart sank and shock showed on her face. "What? How much time does he have left?" "A few weeks at most." Beatrice was breathing in ragged gulps. Her heart was pounding in her chest like a drum signaling an approaching storm. Anxiety gripped her like a vice. How could this happen? Why did he tell him that he would be fine? "I had to get him out of that office," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. "He needed to talk to you about his condition, and that you're the only one who can really help him. I've been through this before. Such conversations are deeply personal, and it's usually better if I discuss them with my wife in private." Beatrice thought for a moment, trying to comprehend the gravity of this revelation. "Okay," she finally said, her voice firmer and understanding breaking through the haze of worry. "I will do my best to help my husband. What is required of me?" First of all, let's talk about his diet. I heard that you switched him to a vegan diet. Yes, it's a healthy choice, Beatrice replied firmly, a hint of defensiveness in her tone. Stop it, right now. This diet threatens his health. But it's more useful. Jason likes it. For many, yes, but not for a man like Jason. This diet disrupts the neurological functions of his brain, and it affects everything. He needs to start eating meat again, immediately. Beatrice felt the ground shift beneath her. Stunned, she tried to make sense of this revelation. She had always believed that veganism was the epitome of health, an ethical choice that would benefit both of them. But now reality hit her like a cold wave. She unknowingly put her husband in danger. Knowing the real expected consequences, she would never have sent her husband on this path. Of course, I'll start giving him meat right away, Beatrice promised the doctor, beaming with determination. But he needs more than that. Do whatever he wants. If he asks for anything, just do it. Just cook whatever he wants and no doubt about it, she added, and there was a hint of concern in her voice. Sounds like a plan, the doctor replied with an encouraging smile on his face. Now let's move on to something important. He shouldn't move a finger around the house. He's too fragile for hard work. Working in the yard, moving furniture, fixing plumbing, painting, solving problems with electricity, none of this is for him. Beatrice furrowed her brows as she considered his words. But I'm already doing all the traditional housework. Do I have to take over everything else? Yes, Dr. Batter confirmed. His tone was even. You will need to manage all this and keep track of expenses. He said that money has been bothering him a lot lately. The stress of hiring help can worsen his neurological condition. Beatrice took a deep breath, pulling herself together. Okay, I'll do my best. I can handle the housework, and I think I can find 1 or 2 friends who are willing to help for free. This way we won't have to spend extra money. Amazing! This conversation is unfolding in a way I never imagined. In my past, many wives have not been so understanding and open. As I said before, I am ready to do whatever it takes to support Jason during this difficult time. Now let's move on to a more intimate topic. Beatrice, you need to step up your game in the bedroom. Wait, what? She replied, knitting her brows in confusion. We have a decent sex life as it is, she defended herself. Dr. Batter nodded, acknowledging her point, but continued. Even with Jason's illness, you still have an intimate relationship once or twice a week, right? Of course, Beatrice admitted, sometimes even more often. Okay, but honestly, it should be much more often. We are talking about doubling or even tripling the number of your meetings. Beatrice's eyes widened in disbelief. What? Why do I need this? Jason's libido has increased due to his neurological disease. By not meeting these increased needs, he puts himself at risk. But his immune system is already compromised. He never talked about needing intimacy, she countered, and there was a hint of concern in her voice. He didn't dare bring up the subject because he didn't want to add to your stress. So I want to put it bluntly. If you want him to flourish, you both need to embrace a lot more passion. Beatrice was stunned, her thoughts scattered. I always thought that our intimate life was enough. My friends are jealous of what we have. She paused, thinking about how to combine her busy schedule with these new expectations. How was she going to find time to triple her intimate moments when she was already overloaded with household chores? Beatrice sat there, shock and reflection reflected on her face. Beatrice's mind was full of questions, but she forced herself to concentrate. After all, Dr. Batter was an expert, and she knew she had to trust his judgment, even if some of it didn't make sense to her. Is there anything else I should know? What is it? She asked, a note of concern in her voice. Yes, he replied in an even tone. He needs to refrain from other intimate relationships. Beatrice's heart sank. Anger bubbled up inside her as she considered his words. Without missing a second, Dr. Batter continued. In fact, he should also not strive to bring you to a peak during regular intimate relationships. This may worsen his neurological condition. The best thing is, if you let him make love to you, let him reach his peak, and everything will be simple. You will need to pretend that you like it so that he is satisfied. Rage flared up inside Beatrice. It seemed that she was being asked to sacrifice everything for her husband's well-being, including her own desires. Is there anything else I need to know? What is it? She asked, barely able to contain her irritation. Do you have beautiful girlfriends? Dr. Batter raised an eyebrow, a slight smirk playing on his lips. There are a couple of very beautiful friends, she admitted. Can you bring one of them? Feeling confused and unexpectedly relieved, Beatrice backed away. Perhaps it was a way to regain a part of her life that she considered lost. Upon entering the consulting room, Beatrice braced herself for the worst, expecting Dr. Batter to suggest something completely outrageous. For example, suggest that Jason improve his health by having affairs with her friends. So when the doctor awkwardly asked if she could set him up with one of her attractive girlfriends, it seemed strange, if not downright unethical. No, I can't do that, doctor, she replied, clearly uncomfortable. Dr. Batter replied calmly, It's not a problem, but it might be helpful for Jason if you encourage your friends to spend time with him. The words hung in the air, weighed down by the subtext. What? Beatrice exclaimed, her voice rising in disbelief. Doctor, are you serious? This can't be a real offer. It's all in the interest of improving his health, Dr. Batter insisted, his tone adamant. By entering into intimate relationships with other women, it's a simple solution. Beatrice felt a surge of anger. This is probably some kind of sick joke. You can't be serious. It can't be for the sake of my husband's health. I assure you, Beatrice, this is quite real, Dr. Batter pressed. If we don't take action soon, Jason's health will rapidly deteriorate. It can't be, she replied, skepticism in her voice. I suspect that Jason is involved in this whole scheme, trying to manipulate me to get an extra portion of attention and pleasure. This is absurd. But Dr. Batter was not at a loss. He spent the next hour telling her all the facts, a mountain of evidence that was hard to ignore. He showed the results of Jason's medical research, as well as comprehensive studies over the past 50 years that described similar cases in detail. The doctor even presented interviews with women who had gone through the same difficult path, and talked about how an extramarital affair, against all odds, saved their husbands' lives. Beatrice's heart was pounding wildly as she absorbed the information. What started as a strange conversation gradually turned into a dilemma that was both disturbing and perhaps necessary. The stakes were higher than she could have imagined. Beatrice froze in place, her thoughts racing wildly as she absorbed the mountain of evidence spread out in front of her. Every detail seemed like a piece of a puzzle to her, and she desperately searched for any sign that Dr. Batter had made a mistake or misled her. But as the weight of the truth settled in her head, she realized with a sinking heart that the doctor was not only honest, but also that Jason's survival depended on following his advice. Okay, I admit it, Beatrice finally said, her voice trembling slightly. Everything you tell me is absolutely true. A wave of determination swept over her. I'm sorry that I doubted you. I will do everything to help Jason, even if it means persuading my attractive girlfriends to be with him. If anyone doubts, I will find a way to ensure that they get what they need, no matter what it takes. Dr. Batter nodded, a serious gleam in his eyes. I appreciate your commitment, Beatrice. It won't be easy, and you'll have to make difficult decisions. But what you do for Jason will really make a difference. He deserves a chance at a long and fulfilling life. As long as he's alive, that's all that matters to me, she replied, her resolve strengthened. That's good to hear, Dr. Batter said, a hint of encouragement in his tone. And remember that when he has such meetings, I strongly recommend that you take part in them from time to time. Do you want me to explain to you the reasons for this? Beatrice shook her head, a knowing smile playing on her lips. There is no need. I believe that everything has a good reason. After that, they shook hands. A tacit understanding was established between them, and Beatrice left the doctor's office, her heart pounding with a newfound purpose. As she entered the cozy surroundings of a nearby cafe, she noticed Jason waiting for her at a corner table with an expression of anticipation on his face. She sat down on the chair opposite him, and he immediately pushed a steaming cup of coffee towards her. It's been a long time, he said, and his eyes lit up at the sight of her appearance. Beatrice took a deep breath, ready to accept the challenges ahead, knowing that every step she took was for the sake of the man she cared about. Is everything okay? Jason asked with a note of concern in his voice. Jason, I wish I could say the opposite, but you're going to die, Jason exclaimed, his voice rising in disbelief. He told me you were going to be okay, she continued, her voice filled with sadness. But he lied. He didn't want to carry the weight of this truth himself, so he shifted it onto me. In a way, he's a coward. How much time do I have? Jason's voice trembled. Panic crept into him. A few weeks at most. The air around him thickened as he tried to make sense of what he had said. He hadn't expected this from Beatrice. Now Jason was completely sure that it would not be possible to save the marriage. Just a month ago, Jason began to notice that Beatrice was behaving strangely and hired a private investigator. When the evidence of her infidelity was in his hands, Jason decided to check how much Beatrice loved him and played a prank on Dr. Batter. In fact, the doctor was a longtime friend of Jason's father and agreed to this prank. If Beatrice had agreed to do everything the doctor said, Jason would have thought about forgiving Beatrice. But now it was clear that she didn't have a drop of love for Jason. Oh my God, is there anything we can do? What is it? He asked, pretending to despair. Absolutely nothing, she replied, her voice sounding resigned, as if sealing the fate they both feared. Well, then it's time for us to get divorced, Beatrice. What? What are you talking about, dear? This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel. Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. I was sitting across from my lawyer, and there were divorce papers between us. Just 2 days ago, my world turned upside down when I was handed these papers. The feeling was surreal, like a scene from a movie. My lawyer shook her head, disbelief written on her face as she scanned the documents. When did you first find out about this? She asked, curiosity and concern mixed in her voice. I took a deep breath, remembering the day before I received the documents. You didn't know? She asked. No, I replied, still struggling with the memories. I entered the apartment. There was tension in the air. She invited me to the table, and before I even had time to take off my coat, she fired a bomb. She wants a divorce. And then what happened? My lawyer asked, bending down to get the details. I paused, memories whirling through my head. It's nothing, I finally said, feeling disappointment creep into my soul. She just got up to leave. I was stunned and called out to her, asking why she thought she could just dump it on me and leave. And what did she say? Silence. Just as I was about to put pressure on her, I noticed a figure lurking in the kitchen doorway, a man in a formal suit. Did he say something? He didn't say a word to me. He just looked at her and asked, "Are you ready, honey?" She nodded, and then he grabbed her suitcase. They went out together, leaving me in a daze of shock and disbelief. What's next? My lawyer asked again, her eyes wide with anticipation. I could only shake my head, realizing that reality was sinking deeper and deeper. And then, nothing. Only the echo of the door closing behind them. He parked his elegant German car right in front of our door, the kind that attracts glances and attracts attention. Not that I cared much about luxury cars, but I could tell by the way it sparkled in the sunlight that it was expensive. She nodded knowingly, as if it were a well-rehearsed script, and her fingers absently flipped through the legal papers spread out in front of us. And what happened next? It's nothing. She walked out the door with him, leaving me in a whirlwind of confusion. When I finally managed to collect my thoughts, I looked around the apartment. It seemed terribly empty. Her clothes, jewelry, cosmetics, everything is gone. Meanwhile, she continued to shake her head, making a gesture of disbelief. Divorce applications like this are not that common. She referred to the prenuptial agreement, which, in fact, meant a confession of infidelity. All she wanted was to get back what she had brought into the marriage. The papers mentioned a trust that belonged to her by right. She insisted on keeping the car, which she said she bought herself. In the meantime, I had to keep my retirement account and the meager savings we had left. I couldn't help but snort at the absurdity of it all. My lawyer looked up from the documents, intrigued. "Enlighten me," he asked. We were married for 4 years, graduated from college 5 years ago, and I got a modest job as a teacher. My retirement account was barely a blip on the radar, and our savings paled in comparison to her trust. "How big is her trust?" he asked, feeling a mixture of curiosity and disbelief. "Several million, I suppose," my lawyer replied casually, "although you've never seen him." I paused, searching for words to express the bewilderment bubbling in my mind. Explaining my upbringing has never been difficult in terms of clarity, but it has often left people confused. My father was a big businessman, but he and my mother firmly believed that wealth should not be flaunted. For them, sincere connections came first, not an extravagant display of wealth. My childhood was certainly comfortable, but it was not filled with luxury. We didn't live in a huge mansion, and we spent our summer days at the local public pool, not in an extravagant private oasis. We may not have flown by plane to such glamorous places, but every summer we enjoyed the sun and sand on our favorite beach. Dad drove a modest car and dressed strictly for work, although his suits were far from designer brands. My mother wore elegant jewelry that sparkled enough to attract attention, but didn't scream attention at her or make her a target. They just weren't attracted to extravagance. From the looks of it, they were really good people. They really were like that. Unfortunately, they died in a car accident when I was just beginning to master the twists and turns of student life. I feel the emptiness they left behind every day. She paused, her eyes lingering on me, and asked, "What happened next?" I moved in with my cousins. College continued, and that's where I met Anastasia. "So Anastasia didn't have a chance to meet your parents?" she asked, her curiosity obvious. "No, I didn't," I replied, "but she met my cousins." "Oh?" She leaned in, intrigued. "And how did it go?" "Well, let's just say the reception wasn't very warm. They didn't have any obvious dislike for her, but they didn't spread out a welcome mat either." My lawyer nodded understandingly, his gaze now focused on the unfolding story. "What are her loved ones like?" "Oh, they are very important, and they make sure that everyone knows about it. To them, I was just nobody, someone from the wrong side. They looked at me like I was some kind of trash from a trailer. By the way, what is your wife's maiden name?" "Capellini's," I replied. Her expression changed from surprise to a carefully crafted smile masking curiosity under the guise of professionalism. "Isn't her father Charlie Capellino?" I nodded slowly. "That's him." This name hung in the air like an unpronounceable weight. A business magnate, a titan of industry, a man caressed by wealth. I could almost see the gears turning in her head, frantically trying to connect the dots. "Does it say about your inheritance?" I hesitated, not knowing how to act on this delicate territory. "Well, that's not what I usually discuss. After the death of my parents, I became the sole heir. I wasn't ready to take over my father's empire, so I let his lawyer manage the sale of the company. All the proceeds were put into a trust that he created for me. I plan to use it when the time comes, but for now I'm just a teacher paving my own path." "Can you tell me how many are in the trust now?" "I think about 60 million. "And yet you are a teacher?" "Yes." I sensed her disbelief. I had already experienced a similar reaction. "I think this money is meant to support me while I'm doing a job that really brings me joy. It's not about messing around or spending money on extravagant yachts. The fact is that this money allows me to pursue my hobbies and look for an experience that brings me true satisfaction. In particular, teaching fills me with a deep sense of satisfaction." It wasn't so much a question as an affirming statement. "Yes, absolutely. I've had some amazing teachers throughout my life, and I see this as my way of paying tribute to their influence." The lawyer sat quietly in her chair, her gaze thoughtful, as if she was assessing the nuances of my situation. I couldn't help but wonder, does Anastasia know about the trust? "She is aware that it is available, but I am not sure that I have ever disclosed the details. She's always been adamant about keeping our finances separate, and we file our tax returns independently each year, so she had no reason to peek at the numbers." "So, from her point of view, you're just a teacher with a modest inheritance. Is that so?" I hadn't thought about it until now, but it seems to be true. I advise you to sign it today before she changes her mind." Her words sounded like a punch to the gut, and I was blown away for a moment. To be honest, let me explain everything. At its core, the law revolves around one thing: money. Of course, there are emotional considerations when it comes to children, but in the absence of toddlers, financial influence decides everything. Take, for example, your father-in-law, Charlie Capolino. He happened to build a complex facade, a house of cards standing on the edge, and only a whisper of wind can bring it down. My relatives would call it all in a hat, but without cattle. A lot of shows without substance. As I have already guessed, he squeezes the maximum out of every dollar. The actual question is simple: are you willing to pay the price for this? This is a provocative thought that made me think about how her family treated me and how she communicated with me in their presence. That was the first blow. It always seemed to me that she was obsessed with wealth, fiercely protective of her trust fund, which bordered on paranoia. It was the second blow. Then a custom-made suit appeared, in which she left, leaving me with a feeling of emptiness. And that was the third blow. At that moment, I made a decision and shook my head decisively. No. Then I ask you to sign this agreement. If you want, I can dig into your trust, but if she leaves it to you, then it's wiser to keep what belongs to you. Let her take her share and move on. I took a deep breath and then let it all out. She was right. I had to admit the truth. My marriage was a failure, and it was time to admit it. Calling her secretary into the office, she told her to bring the notary's seal. I signed the document. The lawyer witnessed this, and the secretary took care of the notarization. Later today, I will hand over the papers to her lawyer and close this chapter once and for all. Her lawyer was an impressive, real ace in the courtroom. This case was dragged out like a drum, and there was no way she could come back and claim at least some part of your trust. I must have looked puzzled, because she took a moment to explain. "Carl, her life is all smoke and mirrors. If her father's empire collapses, her whole world will go off the axis and it will be ugly. You have to step back before the storm breaks. I've never met your wife, but she seemed to me to be someone who thrives on manipulation, and you definitely don't want to become her next victim." I nodded, taking in her words. She was right. The lesson was not easy for me, but nevertheless, I learned it. Visit your cousins. A short distance will help you look at the situation in a new way. She was right. Anastasia left me on the last day of class, and I went out into the summer sun, feeling the full weight of what was happening. I made the decision to use my money. I used these funds to cover my summer expenses and went to the farm to help my relatives. I needed a distraction, and they needed support. It was like coming home, and that summer everything fell into place, except for one thing: my future ex-wife. I had always been only an accomplice to her grandiose story, but now I was free to rewrite my own story. The pieces of my life finally fell into place, and for the first time I was able to see the possibilities opening up in front of me. As soon as I crossed the threshold of my apartment, a wave of nostalgia hit me, and I returned to the city just a week before the start of the school year. My divorce was finally over, but Anastasia's life was a closed book to me, and to be honest, I didn't want to read it. A year and a half later, a whisper of change reached me. Anastasia's father's business collapsed in an unstable economy. It was just a small ripple in the vast ocean of financial turmoil, but it swept around the world. The banks, in their relentless pursuit of profit, lent him money that he could not repay, which led to the flow of debts spiraling out of control. In the end, he was forced to sell his company, keeping the house and most of his cherished possessions, but it was a bitter pill that had to be swallowed. Although many of his employees managed to keep their jobs, the company's management faced the harsh reality of layoffs. Among the victims was Ashley, the man for whom Anastasia left me. It was a tragic saga, but strangely enough, it did not touch my heartstrings. My lawyer's only miscalculation was that Anastasia would come back looking for another chance to get what she thought was rightfully hers. I couldn't help but imagine her father desperately trying to save his fortune and maybe even looking greedily at her trust fund. But no matter how vile their antics were, I doubted he would stoop that low. Anastasia, blissfully unaware, probably never realized that my own trust had a certain value, and I wasn't going to enlighten her. Whenever Anastasia and our marriage slip through my mind, and such moments don't happen often, I can't help but think about how things might have turned out differently if she and her family hadn't treated me with such contempt. She never understood that life goes beyond simple wealth. The true essence of money lies in its ability to enrich our experience and connect us to what is really important. Fixated on preserving her wealth and protecting it from me, she did not notice the wealth of life that I had to offer. But, as they say, it's all water under the bridge. Life goes on, and for me at least, it's going well. As I thought, when Anastasia heard rumors that I had bought an expensive car, she started sniffing out where I got such money. Somehow she became aware of the trust and that it was huge. Anastasia was born, and I was born, and at least he became good for me, but not for Anastasia. When she begged for a second chance, I just laughed and slammed the door in her face. "Goodbye, Anastasia," I shouted after her. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel.